So it now looks like Mbeumo and Gyokeres are going to cost significantly more than originally expected. With Tottenham now interested, Mbeumo's probably going to cost around £60 million and Gyokeres upwards of £70 million after what Sporting have come out and said about their initial agreement. And so in this video I'm basically going to be combining some of the ideas from my previous videos, breaking down a smarter way of spending the rest of United's transfer budget this summer. So rather than Gyokeres, I'd just bring in Mateta for 35 million plus 10 million in add-ons, which I think we could probably get him for, and I'd also bring in Ferran Torres from Barcelona, who they value at 40 million pounds, but I reckon we could send Rashford the other way on loan, with an option to buy for both players at the end of next season. And even if Rashford wasn't going the other way, I'd look to do a loan with an obligation to buy, or potentially just buy him outright. But obviously a loan swap deal with Rashford would be ideal. Now rather than Mbeumo, I'd go and get Kang-in, who PSG have reportedly told Napoli they value at around £33 million, and so those three players would cost a combined £75 million this summer, with Ferran Torres likely on a salary of around £10 million, and Mateta and Kang-in on around £6.5 million each, which leaves money in the budget to improve on other important areas in the squad, but also to potentially invest in some young players who can be loaned out next season but could come back next summer as some of the best young players around. And I'll do a separate video outlining my strategy for that, as well as telling you who these specific players are. But in this video I'm going to tell you the central midfield and wing-back signings who I would look to make with the remaining budget, going through multiple different options before showing you how this squad would set up in Amorim's 3-4-3. But before I get into that, if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to jerseyfifa.co. They've got a variety of different current season and retro jerseys, including the new season jerseys, and they will have the Manchester United shirts for next season when they are released. They sent me over this Manchester United 2006-2007 white away shirt with Ronaldo 7 on the back, alongside this Zidane Juventus shirt from the 1990s as well. If you use code ATLANTIS at checkout, you'll get a 10% discount, so I'll leave it linked in the description and in the comments section below. So Ferran Torres, Mateta and Xerxes are three fantastic centre forward options to have, because they are all significantly different enough stylistically to allow Amorim to change his possession strategy against certain opposition from game to game, but also in-game as well. And you'll see exactly why this can be so valuable against different tactical setups later on in the video, but considering we've only spent around £75 million of the likely 130 that we'd have to pay for Gyokeres and Mbeumo, up to just under 110 even if Ferran Torres' loan was made permanent next summer, or even this summer if we had to, this means that we probably have another £100 million or so to spend on other areas of the squad, considering the sales of players like Antony, Garnacho, Højlund, Casemiro, Collier and Sancho, alongside sell-on clauses for Alvaro and Greenwood, which likely could raise a further 130 to 160 million pounds. So Ederson would have been my number one target, but Atalanta are reportedly demanding £63 million, which is about 10 to £15 million above my max valuation, and so at this point I just cut my losses and go for Kepran Thuram, who I think Manchester United should be able to get for between 35 to 40 million, maybe with some achievement based add-ons on top, which sounds fairly low in comparison to Ederson, but Juve only signed him for £16 million last summer, which would give them over 100% profit in just a year, and they do have to sell in order to buy, so I could see them accepting a fee around that price. Now in a case where Juventus are demanding something too high like 50 million, I do have some alternatives which I'll come on to in a separate video, where I'll also mention some alternative options for some of the other players I've suggested as well. But alongside an athletic, powerful, ball-carrying box-to-box midfielder like Thuram, I'd also look to sign another athletic central midfielder who instead specialised more as a progressive passer, with my top two candidates being Lamine Camara and Hayden Hackney. Now I have made numerous individual analysis videos on these two, so I'll leave some of them linked in the eye above, but I have to say I am still on the fence, but because Bruno Fernandes could also be used in the midfield double pivot, and is fairly stylistically similar to Hackney, considering what he offers creatively in possession, I think Lamine Camara, who is more of a blend between Ugarte, Mainu and Casemiro, makes the most sense when you analyse these central midfield options as a whole in the squad. Thuram, Kamara, Bruno, Mainu and Ugarte gives you a number of different midfield combinations that Amorim could use, which could be effective against different tactical setups from the opposition. Both Thuram and Kamara I'd pay around £35 million expected to a max of £40 million guaranteed. But let's go somewhere in the middle, say £75 million for both, which takes us to £150 million spent and 5 players brought in. From here, I think the squad does look pretty good, although left wing back is an area that I would still be looking at, as I just don't think that at the moment Dorgu is consistent enough with his end product in the final third to be our main starter throughout the whole of next season. Now, the obvious option is a player I've made a video on previously, I think a few weeks ago, and that is Theo Hernandez. Atletico Madrid reportedly were only willing to pay €20 million, €5 million short of Milan's €25 million asking price, which is just £21 million. Now, to me, this seems like the perfect signing for Manchester United. Reportedly, Theo wanted between €7 to €8 million, which is £6 to £6.5 million from AC Milan during contract negotiations, which they rejected, and Atletico were reportedly offering around that same amount. Now, some reports are saying gross, some are saying net. I'm thinking that must be gross, because otherwise it would be about £14 million for the club if it was net. And so I would be willing to offer Theo a 4-year contract with the option of a 5th, on a salary of around £7 to £7.5 million a season, maybe as much as 8, with team performance-based bonuses taking it to around 10. And I think this is pretty fair given his ability and the reduced price we are signing him at. And that would take our expenditure to just under £175 million, with Cunha on top taking that to around 235, which should work out as a net spend of between £40 to £80 million, depending on the money we raise through player sales. Now, before I show you why I think these 6 signings, 7 including Cunha, would be so effective, let me outline what I would call a bonus strategy. So what I've just gone through would be my primary transfer strategy, but I do think that Onana, Bayindir and Dalot could all be upgraded upon given the fees that they could bring in. And you could also say the same for non-starters like Agate and Xerxes as well, and so towards the end of the window, depending on who is available, you could definitely look to move on players and reinvest in better options if they're out there. However, considering Ineos and the fan base are obsessed with long-term thinking, which isn't exactly wrong, it's just being done in the wrong way, another prudent strategy considering the net spend is likely only going to be £40 to £80 million with the transfers I've suggested, could be to sign young players this summer. Whilst their value is relatively low, set up the payment so the initial investment this summer is reduced as much as possible, and then loan those players out with the expectation that come next summer, their value would have increased significantly to then allow United to sell them on for profit, or they could be sent out on another loan once again if needed, or even brought back into the first team setup. And the majority of the young players who I have identified all have the potential to be first team squad players by 2026 or a year later in 2027. And so I'll cover some potential Dalot and Onana upgrades as well as some young players we could sign in separate videos, so make sure you subscribe to the channel for that. But now let me explain why I think my combination of signings is perfect for Ruben Amorim's 3-4-3 against different types of tactical setups. So in the build-up phase against an aggressive man-to-man press, depending on the strengths and weaknesses of the opposition centre-backs, any one of Torres, Mateta or Xerxes could be used. If you're coming up against less physically and eerily dominant centre-backs, then direct longer balls from deep in the build-up phase into Mateta's chest, feet or head, allowing him to bring the ball down under control and then link play with the players behind, is going to be the most optimal tactic. However, against better physically and eerily dominant centre-backs, who maybe aren't as good when having to turn quickly, well, now Amorim could use either Ferran Torres or Xerxes there and have them drop deeper than Mateta, dragging the centre-back higher up the pitch, from where they can look to receive incisive passes into their feet, and either link play or look to turn the centre-back and then drive forward. Further up the pitch, both Ferran Torres and Mateta could also provide movement in behind the two centre-backs, as well as both being highly competent when linking play with their back to goal, with Torres being better when doing this through shorter passes in more congested areas, and Mateta better when receiving direct longer passes, where most of the time he should be able to win the physical duel against a defender on his back, while Xerxes' lack of pace means that he can be given the freedom to drop deeper than both Torres and Mateta, playing more of a false 9 role with powerful runners like Theo, Thuram and Ahmad looking to break ahead of his deeper movement. And because of how complete his skill set is, Ferran Torres could also be used from the right or the left. Both Mateta and Torres have been recording consistently high non-penalty XG over the last 2 seasons or so, And so I could see either player picking up between 14 to 16 Premier League goals as soon as next season if they were to be used as United's main centre forward. Theo Hernandez and Khéphren Thuram's powerful ball-carrying ability makes them valuable ball-progressing weapons either after a turnover on the counter or via artificial counter-attacks from the build-up phase. Kang-in is stylistically perfect for that role ahead of Amad, not only being highly capable technically in central areas between the lines, but he can also float out wide and provide both ball progression and chance creation from that area, whilst also being able to fill in for Amad at right wing back if needed, whilst also being versatile enough to play in either of the wing back or interior forward positions on either side. Lamine Camara and Khéphren Thuram have the athleticism, tenacity and defensive output to be incredibly effective as a midfield double pivot in aggressive pressing situations, as well as in possession when sitting behind the ball in the rest defence, whilst Kamara's creative and incisive passing ability alongside Thuram's ball carrying and pace gives Amorim the perfect stylistic balance in possession. And I am going to cover some tactical game models and patterns of play in more detail in future videos, breaking down exactly how Amorim could use these skill sets to their full effect. So make sure you subscribe to the channel for that, and let me know how you rate this transfer window in the comments section below. And if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to jerseyfifa.co. You can use code ALANDIS at checkout to get a 10% discount, so I'll leave it linked in the description and in the comments section below. And if you want to sign up to my in-game Instagram group chat where we have discussions throughout the week, or get a 7-day free trial to read any of my articles on Patreon, I'll leave that linked on the end screen now as well.